A very good evening to one and all present over here in this virtual webinar on the new Education Policy 2020. I express my deepest sense of gratitude for all of our participants who have shown their interest and have been present over here to be a part of this discussion. I heartily give you a warm welcome to our institution, even though in a virtual mode, and would seek for your presence in the future when things gets normalizes. Welcome you all. So till now, our education policy has focused on what to think, but the new education policy, the focus has been on how to think. So we need to prepare our students to become global citizens while remaining attached to their roots. So a global mindset is needed to be created. Every country goes ahead by connecting its education system to its national values and reforming it as per its national goals. It aims at keeping its present and future generation to be future ready. So as we know, on Wednesday, that is on 29th of July, the Union Cabinet Minister cleared a new national education policy proposing sweeping changes in school and higher education. So today, we have with us a very, very eminent set of panelists who will be discussing in detail about what the features have been laid out in this new national education policy. But before I start, just have a look on this video.
साथियों, देश के पूर्व राष्ट्रपति महान वैज्ञानिक डॉक्टर एपीजे अब्दुल कलाम कहा करते थे, द पर्पज ऑफ एजुकेशन इज टू मेक गुड ह्यूमन बीइंग्स विथ स्किल एंड एक्सपर्टाइज. एनलाइटन ह्यूमन बीइंग्स कैन बी क्रिएटेड बाय टीचर्स. वाकई शिक्षा व्यवस्था में बदलाव देश को अच्छे स्टूडेंट्स, अच्छे प्रोफेशनल्स और उत्तम नागरिक देने का बहुत बड़ा माध्यम आप सभी हैं, आप सभी टीचर्स ही हैं, प्रोफेसर्स ही हैं.
ये जो नई शिक्षा नीति है, जो ज्ञान, विज्ञान, अनुसंधान, जो प्रौद्योगिकी से युक्त नवाचार को लेकर के आगे बढ़ेगी, वो संस्कार युक्त भी होगी, मूल्य परक भी होगी और ज्ञान और विज्ञान और अनुसंधान के क्षेत्र में पूरी दुनिया में शिखर तक जाएगी. और वो ये शिक्षा नीति भारत को एक पूरी दुनिया के ज्ञान की महाशक्ति के रूप में स्थापित.
This education policy, new education policy is good to this nation or to the country or to all of us, because it is coming after a gap of 34 years, and we all are thinking that there should be certain good policy on education by which it will match with globalization or the present requirement or the education system prevailing in much developed countries.
here it is. So let us welcome our very eminent panelist before us, who has a wide range of experience, not only in academics, but also in various industries. So we have with us our first speaker, Dr. Saroj Mahapatra, who is the director of KIIT School of Management. Professor Mahapatra has donned many hats with distinction in his long professional career, spanning 30 years in industry and 8 years in academics. He has held leadership positions in renowned corporate groups in India like Tata, Bajaj, and Jindal, including Navratna public sector undertaking like SAIL and multinational POSCO. He has taught at XIMB and has been the director of Jaipuria School of Business, NCR, since July 2016. After his joining at the helm, the B School has registered a phenomenal growth in reputation in NCR for all-around development. Professor Mahapatra has been playing a very, very pertinent role in the growth and development of KIIT School of Management. I welcome you, sir, to this webinar. Thank you for accepting my invitation and being a part of this webinar. I welcome you, sir. Our next guest is Dr. Sanjay Swar, the principal of KIIT International School. Dr. Sanjay Swar has a PhD in physics from KIIT deemed to be university, MSc in physics from Utkal University. He is certified in school management and leadership by Harvard Business School and Graduate School of Education. Presently, where he is the principal with KIIT International School, which is affiliated with CBSE, IGCSE, and IBDP, placed amongst the top 10 schools of the country. He is also the ex-secretary of IAPT RC 16. In fact, he is a recipient of National Teachers Award by the Education Society Mumbai, which has been placed within top 50 inspiring school leaders of the country. I welcome you, Sanjay sir, to this webinar. Our next speaker is Professor Ashutosh Kar. So Professor Kar has served leading Indian and multinational organizations such as IBM and TCS with global work experience in countries such as Sweden and United States. His areas of expertise include strategic account planning, pre-sales business development, advisory relationship, and partnership. He is a completely IT guy. He is a regional mathematics Olympiad winner and also a recipient of the prestigious T. Thomas Scholarship of Business Leader Award given by Hindustan Unilever Limited. Before joining KIIT, he was working as a senior account manager with Central India. Welcome, Professor Kar. I must say that Professor Kar, apart from his academic credential, is a great photographer and amazing blog writer. I welcome you, Professor Ashutosh Kar, to this webinar. Our next speaker is the very talented Professor Surya Mishra. So Professor Surya has worked with leading companies like ITC Limited and Nokia India Private Limited in diverse roles as in sales and distribution, as well as in brand marketing. He has helped shape some of the upcoming brands in personal category with ITC Limited. He is also the founder of heritage experience startup Gilerio and co-founder of Unmukt Foundation, an NGO dedicated to education for the underprivileged and environmental conservation. Again, thank you, Surya sir, for being a part of this webinar. Our next speaker is Professor Joydeep Biswas. So Professor Joydeep has close to 8 years of industry experience in premium companies like ITC, Nokia, and IBM. He has worked in the domains of sales, distribution, management, brand marketing, as well as CRM. His experience spans across industries like FMCG foods, tobacco, mobile devices, and IT services. He was a recipient of Academic Merit Scholarship by Provident Fund of India at IIT BHU. Before joining KIIT, he was heading Kerala for ITC Food as Assistant Branch Manager. I welcome you, Professor Joydeep, to this webinar. Thank you for being a part of this. And last but not the least, I, the moderator, as well as the speaker of this webinar. Thank you for being here and accepting our invitation and being a very part and parcel of this national webinar on the new education policy 2020. So now I would request Director Sir to just express his view upon that what does this policy has bring forth in terms of the changes and how it is going to affect both the school as well as the higher education in terms of its level of development. I welcome you, Director Sir. Over to you.
Focus of this policy, it's a path-breaking policy, and largest focus is on school. And in a short while from now, we are going to hear from Dr. Sanjay about it. If you see, out of 60 pages, 30 pages have been devoted to the school education. So much of importance. Because unless the foundation is correct, the superstructure will be built. The superstructure is bound to collapse. And everybody today talks about the skill gap that is affecting us. People are not getting jobs. They're saying we are graduates, but unskilled graduates. I mean, we are producing that kind of thing. You know, teachers are there, but they are said that these teachers are not qualified teachers. Though they have a qualification, but in the sense of not quality teachers. So somebody is qualified but not having quality. This is an anathema. Very difficult to understand how this equation works. You are, on the one hand, you say he has the right qualifications, and on the other hand, you say that he doesn't have the quality. I can't understand the same word, how it is interplaying in two different ways, in two different directions. So this policy is actually trying to bridge a lot of these gaps. It is a very disruptive policy. But I want to also mention that education policies, even if it is disruptive, it is set on a platform of continuity. That means tomorrow suddenly everything is not going to change. So please don't expect, I mean, I'll address the participants not to expect any sudden change tomorrow. It will be visible. Okay, yesterday the school was looking something green and tomorrow the school is looking yellow. No, it is not going to happen that way. Okay. So a lot of patience is also required. If we carefully see, it strengthens the foundation. It provides a lot of choice to students. And when you give a lot of choice to students, that means you are kindling their interest. So they will experience a joy of learning. In a sum total manner, if I look at it, the whole focus is to reduce the school bag and yet sharpen the tools of education. So they are studying exactly what they wanted to study without unnecessarily carrying a weight in their bag, which was earlier the case, right? And one thing has happened, there is a seamless scaling up from the play school to the activity mode, to the vocational education, to the higher education. If you see, it is completely seamless. It is integrated starting from the school right to college, to professional education, vocational education, adult education, lifelong learning, everything you see, there is a seamless flow moving from school, right from the foundation upwards. By the time the child becomes adult, I believe through this policy, maybe in 2035, I will see that the child, by the time he becomes adult, that child can say, I know what I want to become and I will become that. I have chosen my career's path, not my father, not my uncle, not my counselor. I have myself chosen my career path. That is one big gain we are going to have. Coming to higher education, I believe the biggest thing that they have provided is the flexibility. They have removed the compartments. That if somebody is studying engineering, he cannot study arts. Somebody is studying science, he cannot science, arts, commerce, management, a lot of compartmentalization was there. I am very happy to be part of KIT University, which has already broken these compartments earlier. We had open elective system. People from different faculties, they could take actually electives in different schools. But at a national level, this has got recognized now. So the multidisciplinary learning is definitely broadens the choice of people, and they are going to be more and more interested in their subjects. Another very interesting thing which has come on is the hop on and hop off, mode of education. You can get into the first year and get out of the get out in the second year and do a job without carrying a stigma of a dropout tag. School dropout, college dropout, these things carry a lot of stigma. Our parents look down upon students who don't score 90%. And those who are school dropouts, they are actually hated in the society. They are considered as if they are criminals. This kind of a mindset is going to change. Along with this, if you notice the assessment system, which has undergone a change, they are calling it with some different name this time. That the assessment system is not going to grade a person in the traditional way. It is called Parak. They are only giving the identity to a person at the end of the high school education. So hop on hop off system is a big plus. I think it is taking out the stigma of dropout. And the credit accumulation system, that's also a very wonderful thing they have brought in. By the process of credit accumulation system, a person can be a really lifelong learner. I have seen as an exception, some of my friends, after retirement also, they have chosen to study some course. But these are very normal things abroad. In India, those things are very exceptions. Now this is going to become a very normal thing. Lifelong education will come because of the credit accumulation system. Nobody will feel he is left out. And one more thing, dignity of labor has been restored by this policy. Because of early vocational education, hop on hop off system, credit accumulation system, tomorrow a carpenter or a plumber will enjoy the same respect as an engineer. And finally, when I look at the online education, the focus on the quality of online education, has actually changed the equation between a normal education when you are going to the classroom and when you are doing it physically, when you are doing it offline. Earlier, the distance learning was also a stigma. In fact, companies, when they were interviewing candidates, they were asking, were you a full-time MBA or you were a part-time MBA? Now, nobody is going to ask that question. And thanks to COVID also, that it has created a situation that online education has got a lot of acceptability. I thought, these are my initial remarks. I thought I will not elaborate further. I have looked very, very illustrious colleagues who will elaborate in detail. I thought of these opening remarks. Thank you, Sikta, for giving me this opportunity to start the discussion.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable insights. It was indeed a very profound insights from you all. Now coming to Dr. Sanjay Swar. Sir, you are the principal of KIT International School. So in school, with its early childhood care and education being a special focus, preparing the child for being ready to learn is a major thrust, isn't it? So the whole idea is to make early entire school education a fulcrum around which the holistic development of the child can take up as a futuristic overview. So global citizen in a modern age that is taking up, along with imparting equity, equality, inclusiveness, and participation which are the major principles which has been laid out in this policy. Universal foundation literacy and numeracy are also essential requisite as far as a hallmark. So learning to learn in a holistic, integrated, enjoyable and engaging manner, rather than going it mechanically, apathetic to these principles in the current format is what makes the national education policy contextual to our current and future needs. So creativity, critical thinking, analytical outcome of a reimagined 5+3+3+4 structure is envisaged as the logical output. So according to you, sir, how do you think that schools are going to be actually benefited because of this policy laid out in the NEP? Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Professor Mahapatra, for giving me this opportunity and also giving an inspirational or motivational talk about NEP 2020. And to go to the background of this, like first NEP was in 1968, in the era of Indira Gandhi. Then second was drafted in 1986 by Rajiv Gandhi, where it was a kind of, the purpose was to give them the education opportunity to equal education opportunity for all. And the first one was up to compulsory education up to age 14. But then it was in between little modified. In 1992, it was modified by Narasimha Rao government. And then 2005, NCF, National Curriculum Framework, came into picture. Then 2009, it was a big kind of hue and cry everywhere, Right to Education Act. And then now, 21st century, the first educational policy, 2020. And when you look at it, I hope this policy is based on kind of improvising 21st century skills, starting from, as ma'am has pointed out, certain things, critical thinking, creativity, collaborative approach, team spirit, and leadership, tech savvy, all these 12 to 14 qualities, these are being integrated in this policy. And I will just emphasize on the major differences, how it is different from earlier years in the past, because after 35 years, we have got this 1985 and then 2020. This is the next education policy. So the first is that initially all these education policy earlier, whenever we go anywhere, we always talk about rote memorization. Indian system of education is based on rote memorization. Even we have also undergone through that era. Now, and always we look at education after age 6, that is grade 1, grade 2, and so on. All central schools or government schools, these are best. But we are, of course, fortunate to have private schools where we start from nursery, LKG, UKG. Now, in the new policy, that has become mandatory for all the schools. And when I'm talking about national education policy, all my viewers should understand, I'm not talking about top brand schools, like we all are adopting these methods quite early. But I'm talking about the government schools where 75% are government schools and 25% are private schools. And if you look at the population of students, of course, it shares the 50-50%. So now the major policy when I'm talking about the government schools improvisation, and of course, private schools are also coming under the scanner. So this, as ma'am has pointed out already, that 5+3+3+4. How it is happening? Just you put this nursery, LKG, UKG, if I'm talking about these English medium schools, otherwise Anganwadi. So 3 years, foundational plus 1 and 2. That's called as foundational stage. So these are 5 years. So then comes 3, 4, 5. That is age group of 8 to 11. Then it is coming in the preparatory stage. That is before middle school. We have 3, 4, 5. That was earlier it was called as upper primary 4 and 5. So you talk about as primary. So this completes about primary, which is also called preparatory stage, class 3 to 5, which is based on activity based and interactive classroom learning, which was earlier, but again it has become very, very interactive. But my emphasis will be on the first one, like 0 to 6 years, how to go on. But let me just give the division. Then comes another 3 years, which we are talking about middle school. That is from grade 6 to 8. And that is again based on experimental learning in core subjects like science, mathematics, social science, as usual subjects will be there. Now again, the fourth division, there is little difference. Earlier it was 9th and 10th secondary and 11th to 12th higher secondary. Some higher secondary schools are in the schools, and somewhere it is in the college, junior college you were talking about. But now it has become into school education, and that is called as secondary. That is stage, and that is 4 years. So this is from age group of 14 to 18. And it will be, as Professor Mahapatra has already pointed out, it will be multidisciplinary studies and critical thinking, flexibility in subject selection. So the child will have this subject selection from these grades also, which was not earlier encouraged. Now, first coming to early childhood education, it is learning with fun. Sir has already pointed out it's joyful learning. How it will happen in lower classes? Like it is not a class, it is a kind of Anganwadi, and it is foundational course. So 0 to 6 years, what government is deciding, like NCERT will of course bring a framework for that. Parents will be guided to guide the children from 0 to 3 years. Kind of after the birth, how to take, I think that will be based on mostly into health and hygiene part. But Anganwadi, that will come after 3 years. So then the thing is that nursery, LKG, UKG, or you can talk of Anganwadi and grade 1 and 2. So it is 5 years. Those things will be based on art, craft, music, relationship with nature. Children love it. Logical thinking and problem solving attitude, of course, it will be developed slowly. And developing curiosity through storytelling approach. Teamwork and collaboration. As you know, when we play some games, definitely it comes teamwork and collaboration. Health and hygiene will also take a prime role there. Ethics, like honesty, not to steal others' things. So these things also will be integrated into curriculum. Self-identity. It is not that I'm a small boy, I can't raise my voices. So it is also like bad touch, good touch. Those things also can be a part of it. Etiquette, behavior, emotional development. All these things are coming under this early childhood education, which was neglected earlier. So this is the best part of this national policy, education policy 2020, where government has thought of taking care between 0 to 6 years. And when we are talking about the focus, major focus will be on learning objectives and competencies and subject integration. So there will be a kind of development of scientific temper and emphasis on digital literacy from early age. They will have emphasis on digital literacy during the middle school. Promotion of multilingual teaching. I'll come to that. Multilingual teaching is very important in this policy. And also the emphasis will be on mental and physical health well-being. Regular health checkups, reduce weight of school bags, and health and wellness will be a mandatory skill development. Inclusive and caring culture at school. The dropouts are because of lack of proper infrastructure, and also there is no proper caring culture. Now it will be there, very much there. And focus on children with disability. There is an inclusive education, if you have heard about it, it's social education needs. So the children will having special education needs also will be included in this. And for this, we will also have to hire the counselors, special educators. So this policy also emphasizes on promoting teachers' quality in the schools. Now, how to have a transformation in teaching and learning process? And the best part is that always, of course, earlier also in the education policies, they were always talking about experiential learning, but here it will be promoted by reducing the curriculum, because giving too much into the curriculum and expecting experiential learning was not possible. So now this is being focused on experiential, inquiry, and discovery-based teaching learning methods. And how is it possible? I probably think slowly we are moving towards the education, the assessment pattern also based on that. It is not on rote memorization, it will be based on inquiry and discovery-based learning. There will be integrated pedagogy, like ICT integrated pedagogy will be there, and promotion of peer tutoring, as I have mentioned, that will also be there. And there will be equal weightage for all kind of activities. There is no much difference between curricular and co-curricular and extracurricular activities. For example, here we have, let us say a child has to take sports, art and craft, cultural, all as extracurricular activities. So this will be also treated as a kind of subject, and children can learn one or the other more activities during their middle school or secondary school also. They can continue. And due weightage will be given to that. And use of integration of technology and integrated technology enabled pedagogy in classes 6 to 12. Now, to promote this, textbooks also have to be reframed. And so if you look at the language policy, so till grade 2, compulsory local language. Now grade 3 onwards, you have 3 language policy. You can add English, you can add Hindi, of course, more emphasis on Sanskrit, which was not earlier. Now, in the new education policy, it is told Sanskrit can be offered at all stages. That's a welcoming step. Why? Maybe in the Sanskrit we have many slokas or many stories which are based from Veda, Upanishad. So I think probably that is the reason for which Sanskrit is being offered now. And also but there is no denial to the entry of foreign language. In the secondary sector, you can have foreign language like we have here French, Spanish, Japanese, and we have German also. So those languages will continue, Korean, Russian, and will also be there, added subjects. But if a child wants to take, they can also have these choices in the secondary level. So that means the board exams also will be based on these subjects. That will be
Thank you, sir. We will be coming up to more discussion with this. So thank you for this input. As such, we are going for a more holistic approach as far as schooling is concerned. And of course, our students will get a flexibility in choosing across different subjects for their overall personality development. Now, I would request Professor Ashutosh to have its inputs, being a tech-savvy person. So infusion of the usage and integration of the frontier technology related to robotics, AI, machine learning, big data analytics, it has to be encouraged to make our youth ready to face the new challenges and the emerging global scenario. So as Indians, we need to not only recognize, but incorporate ensure equitable use and exploitation of the most advanced technology through a more open and easily accessible knowledge management process. So how do you think, Professor Ashutosh, that this tech journey, which has many of the universities have bound to now adapt, which they have not been adapting by far. So in your view, so the idea which is having to have a blended approach using digital to extend desired to facilitate the efficacy and probity of transfer of knowledge to as many as possible. So what is your take to you, Professor Ashutosh?
Am I audible to everyone? Because the irony is I'm going to talk about technology and I'm having lots of technological glitches here.
What is the technological glitch you're facing? In fact, while starting, I was listening my voice. So it was badly hitting upon my ears. So this is what
that's the irony. That's the irony. But in case I'm disconnected, please excuse me and pardon me, because you can switch on to other panelists seamlessly, because it's unstable. So that's a disclaimer I would like to put. So it's an honor and we're talking on this webinar, because education is very close to my heart. I always keep on talking about the policies and interventions that we could do in education. So it's very good thing that something of this sort has come out now and we are talking about it. So without much further ado, I'll straight away jump into the inclusion of technology in education. So I'll talk about technology in education and education of technology. Now that sounds a little funny, I know, because the policy says it is bidirectional. So if you teach education by leveraging technology, it will of course add to more technical know-how, people knowing technology more, but we also need to educate people and teach people about the latest advances in technology that are happening. And there are many technological advances that are happening, which India has to really step up on. So in this context, I'll very quickly talk about 4 things in the technology context. Number 1 is the purpose and intended outcomes. Number 2 is technology thrust areas, which are focus areas. Number 3 is the structural reforms required to achieve our technological supremacy. And number 4 is infrastructural support that is required to enable or to have the outcomes possible. So first, talk about purpose. If you look at the educational policy, it clearly says that there are 5 key pillars the policy stands on. These are access, So access to education by a large number of people, socially disadvantaged. Next is equity, equitable distribution of knowledge and education. Third one is quality. Fourth one is affordability. And fifth one is accountability. Now, technology can play a role in ensuring each of these pillars are delivered to students and teachers and the entire educational fraternity. Okay, now it says that there are a couple of technologies which are disruptive, which have a profound impact on our lives. And these are artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, Bitcoin, and a couple of more. So today, what you're seeing is these technologies starting to make a difference to our lives. So I found out that my son never types anything on the cell phone. Even though we find it's very natural to type on cell phone, he always speaks to Google and searches whatever he wants to search. So new generation is using AI as if it is a given for them. It's normal. Similarly, in educational sphere, in teaching learning environment, you have smart boards, handheld devices, adaptive computer testing. These are changing how classes are done. And the policy says that our classes have to change. How? They say that the computers have now surpassed human beings in processing information which are factual in nature and which are procedural. So if you are doing a number crunching, if you are trying to find out an image, analyze a video, a computer is becoming far more better in doing it. So therefore, we need to change our education and skill our people in things which a computer cannot do in the foreseeable future. Now, if you don't do it, we will have students or output from the educational system who are redundant, who are not required by the industry. So the thrust areas are AI, as I mentioned, 3D printing and 3D machining, big data analysis, because there's an explosion of data everywhere. Every time you scroll your Facebook feed or Instagram feed, you like something, you stop at a particular picture, you are creating data. And this tremendous amount of data has to be analyzed, and therefore data science is going to be important. Similarly, there are genomic studies, study of gene, biotechnology, nanotechnology, neuroscience. These are the fields where the policy envisages that India has to have supremacy, has to lead. This has to be achieved with deep linkage with the industry. So industry has to be very closely integrated into the educational system, into the college and university system. If you just quickly look at the statistics, I was looking at a 2018 statistics by Adobe, and it says that while US is the undisputed leader in AI with about 2,000 startups and companies in the AI space, China is closely following with more than 1,000. And if you look at India, it is not even 150. So, and many experts are saying that China and US are going to be the next superpowers in AI. And we are far, far behind in that. China has created a military and a civil fusion in AI, wherein the civil AI has to flow into military. They're creating autonomous vehicles to add to their defense. In that context, we need to create some structural reforms to bring technology into education. And the biggest one is a new alliance. It's called National Educational Alliance for Technology, in short, NEAT or NEAT. NEAT is an autonomous body. It will provide a platform for assessment, learning, planning, and administration of technology. So it will basically look at the entire technology landscape in the country and test those technologies which are relevant to education, rigorously test them, transparently test them, and use them for enhancing the learning environment. So basically, what is NEAT going to do is provide the best educational technology to students and teachers. It will create a portal where teacher learning can happen, where student can register and look at courses. Right now, if you see, there are two important websites that the Ministry of Human Resource Development has created. One is Swayam. Swayam is very similar to your Coursera, where you can take courses of your liking. Any university with due approval can float a course on this platform, which is Swayam. Diksha is an online platform for school students. So the policy says that universities have to be leaders in disruptive technologies. They have to create instruction materials, course materials, learning materials for everybody to kind of learn the new. So they have to be research oriented, and they really have to step up on these technologies. And finally, the final point is infrastructure support. What will the government do to support technology and the use of technology in schools? It says that it will deliver distance learning courses and online courses to a large number of students, especially people who are disadvantaged or in distant areas. They will be able to learn using online courses. Second is that almost all the classrooms, and especially the model classes or model schools, will have access to the latest digital technology, and almost all classrooms will have video viewing equipment. So you can watch videos and you can play several video lessons and lectures. A rich set of educational software by NEAT with private partnership for students and teachers at all levels, not just school, but at higher education level, which is accessible to a wide range of users, including those who have disability or who are remote users who can't come to a classroom so easily. And these will be led by both center and state bodies, and center bodies such as NCERT, CBSE, and NIOS, which is National Institute of Open Schooling. So they will support this creation of e-content, delivering learning to students across the country. So these are the 4 points quickly that I think is going to be the cornerstone for enabling a technology infrastructure and technology enabled education in the country as per the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ashutosh. Indeed, very insightful point coming out from you. Next, moving on to our next speaker, a very young professor and a very talented professor, Professor Surya. So, Professor Surya, the policy in form of making professional education from the current standalone, which is a siloed version, to being multidisciplinary, organically evolved institutions, or a cluster-based one seamlessly, as also in an integrated manner across various domains, be it in technical, be it in managerial, be it in medical, be it in legal. So learning reskilling has been the need of the hour. Adult education and lifelong learning has been given due importance in this NEP policy. So promotion of Indian languages, art, culture is also an important aspect. So pride in what our heritage has to offer needs to be the guiding principle, rather than the blind apping of the Western models as it is present in the scenario, which is to be encouraged. So Professor Surya, what is your take on this, and how essential it is for our coming generation to reskill, retool, and to adapt themselves with the policy context? Over to you, Professor Surya.
Right, ma'am. Thanks a lot. I will try to be as brief as possible. Very rightly pointed out by you and before me, Professor Kar, and before that, Dr. Suwar and Dr. Mahapatra also pointed out similar things. The guiding principles of this new education policy starts with access. And it is visible throughout the policy across the various levels of education in the policy. Access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability have been the guiding principles of national education policy. And India, incidentally, ranks 26th in terms of higher education system in the QS rankings. India is one of the top 50 definitely, but it ranks 26th. Number 1 is US and number 2 is UK. India ranks 26th because it fails miserably on access. it gets the second lowest point amongst 50 countries. Only Pakistan is lower than India in terms of access to education in the ranking framework. India gets amazingly high numbers on economy of education, where it is next only to US, and it is the second ranked country in terms of economy. So we have to understand that access has been a problem with us. Dr. Suar so kindly pointed out gross enrollment ratios and stuff like that. The older national education policy of 1980s, which were revised and in 1992, did talk about adult education and access to education for adults also, but the entire focus was on adult literacy. Now the focus has absolutely changed to lifelong employability. We are talking about how can people get reskilled, upskilled over the entire duration of their life and have lifelong employability. So the adult education focus, which was earlier about getting people, older people to learn, to be literate and reduce disparities in the economy, has absolutely vanished. And now we are talking about how can we make a 30-year-old person learn new skills, become better employable, maybe reskill them entirely because of the changing dynamic nature of the economy today. So a lot of change has happened there. A lot of focus on online, which Professor Kar also covered before me. And now the guiding principle is that all educational institutes who are able to award a degree, are accredited for that, can now learn open distance learning programs, which changes the ballgame altogether. Earlier, you needed a specific license to run distance learning programs. Now that has gone. So all sorts of institutes who are accredited for a program can now run open distance learning programs, which is wonderful. The other point that I wanted to make was that overall integration of the entire higher education sector, and apart from a few things, everything else being managed by the National Higher Education Regulatory Authority. So that is going to integrate professional education and mainstream education, which was in classical sciences or arts or other things. So that will help integrate stuff and increase the flexibility, which is one of the guiding lights of the guiding principles of the national education policy. The last point that I would like to quickly make is that there is a thrust upon online education, and one of the minor points mentioned is also using online modules to ensure that classical languages like my own, Odia, and also older languages like Pali and even Persian, lest somebody talk about there being a communal agenda or a Hindutva agenda, also Persian. So classical languages also being taught through online modules and helping revive these beautiful languages which have wonderful heritage stored in them. So I just wanted to make these 4 points. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Professor Surya. Indeed, in a very short span, you covered so many aspects which are really, which our participants have really got to know about it. So thank you so much. Now coming to Professor Joydeep Mishra, sorry, to Joydeep Vishwas. So, yet this aspect is not touched in the policy, but for our younger generation, this is what they look for: jobs and employment. Yes, certainly, yes, this is what is the younger generations and those who are going to pass out with a BTech or MBS. So building on the creative foundation of higher education, the idea is to build a higher education system which is more holistic and multidisciplinary education. So providing alignment with gainful utility-based approach with choice and freedom to the student to experiment with what is best suited to them rather than be limited and inhibited by the current constraint is what is one of the most important outcome of NEP. So in that sense, a more modular or a menu-based offering to the student is envisaged, wherein he or she can transfer credit, plan his education level, transdisciplinary level of learning relevant, and make his journey ahead with a proper kind of knowledge with him. So with that, so my question is, that with that sort of background, how is it that it is going to affect the employability situation? Can you give your viewpoints on that? Over to you, Professor Joydeep.
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity and inviting me for this panel of esteemed panelists. Good evening, my co-panelist, Director Sir, Dr. Suar, Ashu Sir, Surya Sir, Shikha ma'am, yourself, and also very good evening to all my students here. So first of all, let me say I'm in a very difficult situation. Such stalwarts of education, starting from Director Sir, Dr. Suar, Ashu Sir, Surya Sir, have voiced their already explained and informed us so much, and I have myself learned. So on the other side, there is
aspect. So you have all,
yeah, and on the other side, we have these students who might not be very keen by now. There might be a fatigue setting in. So it's like being in a GD placement, because you were talking about jobs. So it's like being in a GD placement, very, very difficult situation. But still, I'll try to put my best foot forward on that. So I'll just quickly try and because most of our audience are students, and I'll try to summarize the policy from student perspective, student career perspective. A good employment opportunity in education arises if a student is focused on three things. Okay? So that's my understanding, my view on it. First is the curiosity, which Dr. Sanjay Suar spoke about, Surya Sir spoke about, curiosity by asking questions. Second is learning. Okay? And again, learning can be driven either by trying to think what or by trying to think how. Okay? Director Sir spoke about how curiosity and learning is now a lifelong process, not something which ends at the age of 18 or 20, and Surya Sir also spoke about it. So this curiosity leading to a learning, and now more learning on how rather than what, and finally that learning leading to application. So I think if these three things become seamless for a student, students who are listening to this, that will lead to their brighter career chances, brighter employment opportunities. How does this policy address these things? So I'll use three words which are very common or very frequent in this policy, and has already been discussed also to some extent. First is the multidisciplinary approach. The students today are being encouraged to learn different things, which makes them more employable. Just to give an example from management education, if we have a student in data analytics, so understanding only data analytics will not help. So if I look at it, one of the biggest applications of data analytics is in the field of biotechnology. As per the present situation, an MBA student today is not exposed to biotechnology education. So if this multidisciplinary approach is followed not only in letter but in spirit, this will make our students, our learners, much more complete, in the sense that they will have much more broader understanding of fields and applications where they can showcase their learning. And I must also say that thankfully KIT University has been a pioneer in this. Again, our director mentioned it, and our founder has been driving this multidisciplinary approach at least 4 to 5 years back. So I take pride in this fact that what National Education Policy is talking about today, we have been driving it for last 4 or 5 years. And I think Surya Sir, Director Sir spoke about open elective courses, and we have been doing it. So our learners have that opportunity, or have had that opportunity even without this policy. The second thing which makes this policy, which makes our students more employable, is flexibility. Students can enter and exit at various points. There is a concept of credit bank. So which means a student is faced with adverse situations. So for example, a student who has done just 1 year of undergraduation program, and then at the end of the first year of undergraduation program, there is a COVID situation, financial problems. So today they have to start again from scratch. But this policy gives them the flexibility with the use of credit banks and transfer of credits to start the education exactly from where they left. Okay? The last perspective which I want to bring, what makes this policy, how this policy helps our students become more employable, is through globalization. I think a very, very progressive approach which this policy has taken is to allow the top international educational institutes to set up their shop in our country. Okay, so of course our education system has its flaws or fallacies or whatever, but I'm sure that with the exposure to international education, our learners will only develop further. Today we have a lot of Indians hemming or leading international institutes, and we take pride in that. But I must also add that a lot of these international leaders, like Sundar Pichai, so Sundar Pichai was from Surya Sir's College of IIT Kharagpur, and I know that's a great institute. But even then, to become a Google, get into Google and become a Google leader or CEO, he still had to undergo foreign education. So I think that access to international education is a big advantage for upcoming learners. Okay, so these three things, multidisciplinary, flexibility, and globalization, are the keywords which will help our learners. I just quickly want to add, ma'am, which is beyond the question that you asked, but I just take a couple of minutes. From the institution's perspective, I think the keyword which I see for institutes like KIT University is autonomy. Okay, so there have been a lot of debate for last 60-70 years, and there have been a lot of controlled mindset. So which is being, with this policy, for the first time, I see that control mindset reducing. Although I would say it's a long way to go, but at least there's a step in that direction. Also, better performance will be rewarded with more and more autonomy. KIT University has already access to some kind of autonomy because of being an institute of eminence, but I'm sure that the country and the higher educational institutes will benefit much more. A couple of concerns which I have with policy, and so that it could be a bit debatable also, but this is my personal view. A few concern points which I think this policy has not touched upon and can help our students even further in their career and their jobs. One is that we still continue to treat education as not for profit. It's a very strong bullet to bite. I don't know when the political will be there to move away from this. My personal opinion is that if we want the highest quality professionals, if we want the highest education standard, somewhere we will have to bite this bullet and consider education also as a professional. I don't want to call it business, but at least a professional domain, right? So that is one thing which this policy doesn't touch upon. I would also want to see more evaluation based on outcome of institutes and outcome based evaluation of students also, instead of looking at what is the inputs. And the final thing is my concern is with respect, with a small element. So although there is a step towards autonomy, but I also see the word capping on fees. And whenever government gets into pricing, I am very scared. I'm very scared, and I'm very scared of going back to a license Raj. And I don't think government getting into, this is my personal opinion, getting into pricing perspective of any field, and specifically a public benefit like education, can be a matter of concern. So those are just few words from my side. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Professor Chaudhary. Indeed, a very relevant point which you have posed with respect to the education as well as the employability. So NEP 2020 is certainly a pathway for generating more employment opportunities for our young generations to come. So with that, we are completing with our panel discussion. Now we will be open to questions from our audience, and I see lots and lots of questions coming in the chat box. So one of those pertinent question which has come is yes, this is from Sankat Dubey. So what do you think, how critical thinking as a part of education be taught as a part of studies, and how would how would it be evaluated? So how is that he is curious about. So regarding the evaluation part, so how do you think that critical thinking, is it a part of education? Rather, critical thinking should be taught. Anyone in our panelists would like to take it up?
Sukta, I will request you to unmute all the speakers. Okay.
Sir, if I am unmuting it, it will be...
Sir, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have done it. Surya, why don't you respond to this beautiful question?
Right, sir.
Critical thinking.
Okay, I think the questioner is probably talking about whether critical thinking can be taught and whether it could be evaluated. I believe it could be both. It could be taught and it could be evaluated. The more you practice critical thinking, the better you become at it. And though maybe the doubt is stemming from the fact that there is no structured document or text or curricula around critical thinking, and that's why we are not able to understand how it would be taught or evaluated. But I'm sure there are enough and more number of books around that. There is sufficient literature, especially in disciplines like psychology, around critical thinking. And I'm sure it will be taught and evaluated pretty well. Just that we have never thought of it as one of those academic things. Though I believe it is one of the major components of intellectual quotient as we look at it currently, but we have kind of compartmentalized into spatial intelligence, into numeric intelligence, into linguistic intelligence, and we have not probably given as much importance to critical thinking as a part of intelligence itself.
Thank you, Professor Surya. Another question coming up from Subhashish Thakur. So hello, Subhashish. So how pre-NEP passed out students would cope with the consequent stances in the market? So I mean how they we can compare to the NEP passed out students. So this is basically a kind of comparison between the Gen X and the Gen Z. So if I look into that Gen X category, for them 60% was considered as a gold medal, or it was a 24 karat gold. But now even 90% is just not enough, because student scoring has touched 100%. So how is that a weightage or a weighing index can be created in order to make a comparison? Because yes, competition becomes very, very stiff and tough with such a kind of competition between the Gen X and Gen Z. So anyone would like to answer to this? As such, a part of the queries, I hope, Mr. Subhashish, I have answered through my reading out this question. So anyone else would like to take it up?
You can direct it to any panelist. Yeah, your choice.
Okay. May I if I?
Please.
Yes, Professor Joydeep.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Subhashish, for a wonderful question. First of all, let's acknowledge that every subsequent generation has greater opportunities, and they have that differential advantage, and it's a good thing. So first of all, let me access of as professors, we see a lot of access, a lot of opportunities for our students, and I think it's a great thing that the next generation has greater benefits. With respect to how can we compete, I don't know if compete is the right word. But again, taking a cue from what our director mentioned, lifelong learning is a perspective which this education policy incorporates. And if lifelong learning is a perspective that, which has to be ingrained with all of us, then I'm sure the opportunity of lifelong learning is as much for a pre-NEP candidate as it is for a post-NEP candidate. So I think if we have that mindset, Surya Mishra spoke about reskilling and upskilling throughout the career, which is already a reality, NEP or no NEP, okay, which is already a reality. So that approach and that mindset, I'm sure will help us perform better in our careers, irrespective of whether we passed out before NEP or after NEP.
In fact,
Thank you, Professor Joydeep. There is another very interesting question. The chat box, in fact, is full of questions. So, yes, sir.
Oh. I just want to little bit of supplement it.
Sorry, sir. Sorry.
There was a survey conducted by MIT about their own graduates. What do they do after 5 years they pass, 5 years of passing out? And it was found that most of them have changed their skill. That means that they have changed their life. Okay. So they passed out as a graduate of something, but after 5 years they have reskilled themselves to do something else. Okay. So if you do any kind of random survey, this is the kind of situation which is going to happen in future. And rather it is going to happen faster, right? So getting fixated to particular numbers, in terms of your achievements, makes no sense absolutely in the current.
And we have a couple of beautiful examples of reskilling in this panel itself. So Professor Ashutosh sir is an engineer, and then he worked in IT industry. Then he went on to do management, and then he worked as a manager, and then he became a teacher. He's a photographer, and he's a cyclist, and whatnot. Same for Surya sir, and I know for director sir for sure.
I was the chief. Hello, can you hear me, all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Can hear you.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay, you're audible. I'm not audible now, sir.
Okay.
I think it's taking some correct.
Sure.
Ma'am, please go on.
So I'm further continuing with the questions. There is another interesting question that from the last 34-year total expenditure on education was around 1.15% of total GDP. But now, according to the new education policy, government has planned 6% of its total GDP. So do you think that the quality of education will improve with such a weightage of allocation? So let me answer this. So India's rank, it is 62nd position, if I say, in total expenditure on education per student, and it measures the quality education in terms of the pupil-teacher ratio in across all the cadres of education. So back in 2000, I'm just giving you a figure of 2018-19, the country was spending 3% of its GDP on education, so which estimates to be around 5.6 lakh crore. So now the ambition of 6% of GDP, which is completely more than doubled. So this is going to definitely ensure in terms of building a new future, in terms of creating more ventures, in terms of job opportunities, and definitely coming up with new jobs. So that is how, yes, exactly, this is too ambitious and seems to be rare, but still then, yes, it can be achievable.
See, the point is not only how much you spend on education, overall 6% or 5%. In fact, India has been always budgeting 6% for education. But the issue is where exactly you are spending that money. Large amounts of money have gone wasted by putting it at places like Ashutosh mentioned, or somebody mentioned about adult education. From 1992 onwards, we spent so much of money on that, instead of thinking it is not just adult education, it's not adult literacy, it is adult employability. But the focus was on adult literacy. So, a lot of money got wasted. So, have to have a clear focus on where you are exactly spending the money. Like in the current environment, the money has to be largely spent on technology. Like he said, technology in education and education in technology. These are the two areas we need to spend the money. Instead of putting it there, suppose we spend on midday meals and we waste more money on that front, then we will be where we are. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Next question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So can we take up some direct question from the audience because we are almost done with the questions.
Please.
So anyone from the audience would like to have?
So will they unmute themselves or how will they ask?
Yes, they can unmute themselves. Pooja Yadav has raised her hand. Yes, Pooja, you can come up with your question.
Pooja, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir and ma'am. So my question is, as mentioned earlier by Director sir also and Sanjay sir also, that that schools are going to, and as well as Ashutosh sir, that schools are going to invest more on technologies. Basically, coding will be from class 6 as mentioned in NEP policy. So these things are actually going to be funded, right? Because small schools and universities, they don't have this amount of fund they can have that they can actually provide this kind of technology to the students at that time. So how these schools or universities are going to fund themselves when when we already know that 6% of the GDP is also only there in education. Also from the if I talk about 2015 to 16 survey, 78% of the education was found to be privately managed, where 68% of the education system did not receive any kind of aid. So where and how this schools or universities are going to achieve this technology? If yes, how?
Let me take that question. I think part of the question is relevant to what I just about. Can you hear me, Pooja?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Pooja, technology is scalable, right? If you build it from, a lot of universities and schools can use it, and you do not require everyone to be well funded to be able to use that platform. For example, platforms like Swayam, where universities offer online courses, or teacher portals where teachers can learn several lessons or teaching technologies or teaching methods. Everyone in the country, whosoever has a decent network connection, would be able to get those benefits. So funding, of course, is important in terms of doing research, buying equipments, but that is exactly what additional investment in education, which is from very little percentage right now to 6%, is going to do. So research is going to be funded, overseen by the National Research Foundation, and there are money to be given to universities. So universities will be larger now, because many of these standalone institutions which do not have enough fund will slowly be upgraded to larger multidisciplinary institutions with greater endowment and greater capacity to fund technological infrastructure. So that is in the plan, that we want bigger institutions and not smaller institutions. We don't want standalone colleges. We want bigger universities. So therefore, it will be easy to disseminate funds to these institutions, and they will also be better endowed, given that they are bigger in nature. And there are many other things also, like teaching complexes, where schools come together to share infrastructure, to share teachers, so that nobody is at a disadvantage because they are small or they're at a remote place. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, I have another question.
Pooja, can we have one more, because there are still more audience?
Yes,
so let's
yes,
give an opportunity.
Yes,
okay, thank you. So anyone else, any questions from the audience?
Simran has raised her hand.
Yeah, Simran.
Hello, good evening, one and all.
Good evening.
I want to ask question regarding the education for each and everyone. As we know, the students which are on the roadside students, beggars, and also we can see the child labor data. India is in the list. So I want to ask that why and what could be the better approach for them, those students who are even not able to get into the primary government school. No. So when this will be mentioned in our education policy, how much time it could take, and why not still nobody haven't talking about this. So that's my point. And child labor plus unemployment, and not every parent know about this government primary school. This is the situation in our India. Not every parent know, and uneducated parents, they some of them know that yes, primary school is there. We have to just dress up our children, and let them go to the schools, primary schools. Their midday meals are being given, but most of them don't know. So they what they do, they send their children to labor work. So that is harming poverty.
Keep your questions brief. Exactly.
Yes. I could understand the question. Yeah, I will be able to kind of answer to her. The question was related to the street children. Probably that was the focus. But one should understand now, if we have the schools opening for age 3 to 6, obviously we can take care of those children at the early age. Now, a lot of NGOs are working. Even I am also associated with two to three organizations. ASEAN is one of them here in Bhubaneswar. Even I also go personally to near that Sriyaswati cinema hall, and here we have the people, we are working with them, and you will be surprised to know 50% children, those who are going to the schools, they had dropped out because of the parental problem and also the parental nature at home. So they were all out of the school. Now out of them 50% have gone into the school in the last 7 years, in my knowledge. So there are always opportunities for them. The students like you, if at all you are coming across any kind of children, just Google it. Nearby many societies will be there, those who will be helping those kind of candidates. And I'm very sure those students can be taken care of. Even KIIT also has opened a school for street children in Rajabgarh in Delhi. We have so many children now, they're studying from Delhi street children. So when you are getting those children in any of the city and some people are coming ahead to help them, definitely there is a way. And this is all free education. When we are talking about sending them to a school, the school headmaster or the principal is bound to take them only with our kind of request and with our kind of recommendation, with the parental support. They will definitely go, and all free. There is no expenditure in that.
Simran, if your question is specifically about dealing with these people which are socially disadvantaged in the policy, there's an entire section allocated to this particular thing. Okay, can you hear me, Simran?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Simran, it clearly lays out in so much words as to what is the responsibility of various governments, state and center, and also what are the steps to be taken by all higher educational institutions or HEIs. Okay, I'll just give you a couple of them in the interest of time. It says that a government has to set clear targets for gross enrollment ratio for the socially disadvantaged people. They're called SEDGs, socially and economically disadvantaged groups, SEDGs, right? There's a section for SEDG. They have to ensure gender balance in admission to all the higher education institutions. They have to earmark budgets for their scholarship, for their education, their fees reduction. They have to earmark budgets. Institutions have to develop, they have to make the admission process more inclusive. They have to make the curriculum more inclusive so that people develop empathy towards these sections of the society. They have to mitigate the opportunity cost and fees for pursuing higher education. They have to ensure socio-emotional and academic support to all such students through suitable counseling and mentoring programs. So there is an entire section given to how to deal with these people who are at a disadvantage. So that's what, if your question is, then that is the policy already talks about it.
Thank you everyone. As we are closing to 6, so I would request that we should wrap up now. So just one round of thought, just as far as implementation part is concerned. Just quickly from all of our beautiful, lovely panelists. So what is your take? Professor Sarosh Mahapatra, sir, what is your take on the implementation?
See, the elephant's task is not its biting teeth. Okay. The policy is not implementation per se. So the biggest challenge will be how do we implement the policy? And as I see it, that this NEP 2020 can deliver only if there is a honest public-private partnership. Like Joydeep mentioned, government should trust private institutions with their money. They should not unnecessarily doubt them about profiteering. They should allow them the comfort to plan their expenses, hire good teachers, and run their business freely. Similarly, the private sector should also allow government, trust the government regulators, and not hide things from them unnecessarily, which is causing suspicion, unnecessary suspicion in certain quarters of the government that private sectors are indulging in profiteering. If both the parties, they trust themselves, they come forward, I think this is an implementable policy.
Thank you, sir. Just one quick line from Sanjay, sir.
Yes, I'll talk about specific school education. Yes, Anganwadi workers have to be well trained, and infrastructural development has to be very much there. If somebody has gone to Anganwadi station, you might have seen how they are dilapidated state, so that should not happen. And the vocational course, if you are implementing, that should run properly with a career plan behind it. And then this thing will be very, very successful and it will be joyful learning. Thank you.
Right on. Professor Ashutosh Kar, a quick view from its implementation part?
I think for me, the success hinges on one single thing, which is the most important thing in my opinion, which is attracting talent to educational field. If you're able to attract the top talent, so that it's not a last resort for people, but something that people will look forward to as a teacher, we will be able to really deliver on the promises.
That's true.
Quickly, Professor Jaideep.
So yeah, again, I'll agree with Ashu sir and Director sir. Just build on that. An educational institute comprises of infrastructure and people. Money can buy infrastructure, but if you want real people and real talent to come in, that will be the biggest challenge in execution.
Thank you, thank you. And over to you, Professor Surya. A quick round for it as far as its implementation is concerned. What do you think?
I think the political will is already there, and the governments at state and central level both have shown a lot of enthusiasm around the implementation. The last decade or so, a lot of changes have already happened, and I see a very positive trend in implementation. The only thing is that the government has to slowly also think of going out of education as one of the parties involved in it. So the regulator cannot be the implementer. So that separation has to slowly happen. I'm sure the direction is that, and it will happen in due course, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So before I end, I must thank all our revered guest of honor who has very nicely given their view on the various policy mechanisms laid out in the national education policy. So the NEP which is an attempt to make our education system, its curriculum, its infrastructure, governance, and the entire process directed towards meaningful development of the students and the teachers in line with Education 4.0 principles, which are themselves a derivative of the Industry 4.0. It is impelled by the happening of the merger of the cyberspace, the physical space, and the biospace in the techno-economic domain-led future of the global society at large. As such, NEP is aligned and relevant to the aspiration of a youthful and resurgent India ready to leverage the demographic dividend. So let us hope that this NEP becomes a great success in terms of its implementation. I will just end with a very, very small image. Can all of you view this?
Yes.
Yeah. Choluteka.
Any kind of, yes, of course. Professor Ashutosh has correctly hit it right. Choluteka. So what does this imply? So I just want to end it up
from nowhere to nowhere.
Yes, so this is what adaptability to change and change yourself to adapt something new. So this is what we are hoping for from the new national education policy. Thank you so much, our wonderful, eminent speakers. Thank you, Director Sir. Thank you, Dr. Sanjay Swa Sir. Thank you, Surya Sir. Thank you, Ashutosh Sir. And thank you, Jaideep Sir. And thank you all my lovely students and participants all across for your interest and be there. I have seen the feedbacks in my polling chat. So more than 98% are interested to join in the webinar in future also. Have a great day.